Hello and welcome to another ADA Q&A. Jess Segovia here, ADA guru, and I do specialize in all things related to the operating requirements of the ADA. And there are many, many ADA requirements in society and even in transit, including facility accessibility, but that's not really my strong suit, although I do help agencies with bus stop accessibility and putting together your bus stop accessibility improvement program, things like that. But I would say my specialty and what I enjoy the most are the operating requirements. How do we safely, consistently, and within compliance provide our public transportation services to people with disabilities? And so that is what we will be talking about today. Of course, please start typing your questions, whatever has come up for you lately. And I do have an interesting topic to address for you today. Of course, we know that there are lots of opportunities or elements of the ADA that we can talk about. Driver assistance is always a big one, right? Denial of service, people smell, there's feces on their wheelchair. What can we do? And of course, our favorite ADA paratransit requirements. There are many. And as you know, a lot of strings come with providing ADA paratransit services, a lot of data requirements. And this data is often what shows whether we are compliant or not, right? And so that's a very important aspect for us to understand. And of course, assisting people in wheelchairs, large, oversized wheelchairs, things like that, often quite a challenge for us. So I'd like to share, of course, an ongoing training opportunity that's coming up, or my ongoing marketing of this training opportunity. We've really picked up with registrations. There's only a handful of registrations left to what we're calling our Training in Paradise in Hawaii, October 7th, 8th, and 9th. So I know several of you on here are already registered for that. I'm looking at the list of participants. Thank you so much. It's going to be a great 3 days. When someone says to me, oh, I can't go, Hawaii, it's too expensive or to this or to that. The truth is, it's a lot less expensive for me on the West Coast. I'm in Los Angeles to fly to Hawaii than it is to fly to Texas. I paid a lot of money having to fly into Dallas a few weeks ago, and I think flying to Hawaii was two-thirds of that price. And so I don't want you to think pricing is going to be completely unreasonable compared to any other conferences or trainings you attend, because I promise you it won't be, okay? We will be on a beachfront resort, a Hilton. It's beautiful. So of course, would love to see you there. I will be next week in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, at the Transportation Association of South Carolina conference, task conference. We're hoping there's supposed to be like some kind of hurricane moving in that direction. We're hoping it will turn away and there won't be any issues. I'll also be in Utah, September 10th through 12th for the URSTA conference, Utah Urban Rural Specialized Transit Association. So maybe I can see you there. And then I've just booked to participate once again with my good friends at Transit Technologies, the Transit Mobility Alliance Conference. That's a great one as well, and that's coming up in late October. So you can see information on that conference at transit-technologies.com, and then there's a link right on that homepage so you can learn more about that. They have a whole family of transit technologies and services that they offer, and so they've been a big fan of my work, and I'm a fan of many of their products as well. So there's an opportunity there also. All right. I do have some webinars coming up as well. I'll share that information towards the end of our session today, but of course, paratransit eligibility is a big one and a new one, improving driver training programs, right? Honestly, when we focus on improving the ADA element of our driver training program, we always, because it's all connected, we always find ways to improve our entire training program, right? Even elements that are not ADA related. So I'm really going to start advertising that one a little more and hopefully get many of you to participate, okay? Let's talk about our ADA topic of the day, if you will. And this question came in today, and I responded to someone. I don't think they were able to make the webinar here today, but I was happy to do a little research and find this answer. We have someone in ADA paratransit and they cancel or they were a no-show, right, on their initial pickup. Can we cancel or deny the return leg of that trip? And the answer is no. This information is out of the DREDIF. I'll pull that up for you, but it's an organization that provides a lot of accessibility related guidance. Um, and so this information says we cannot cancel that return trip automatically. FTA has made a policy interpretation that if a rider misses a scheduled outbound trip, we transit agencies may not automatically cancel their return trip, okay? Each leg of the trip must be treated separately and without indication from the rider that the return trip is not needed, then it should remain on the schedule. So I know a lot of you, operationally speaking, probably don't like this guidance, but we have to always be respectful of our riders, and perhaps our best practice is to not assume if someone missed the trip, it's because they didn't care about it and they didn't want it, right? Sometimes, as is mentioned here, maybe the wrong pickup address was in the system and you went to the wrong location. But most often, when riders miss trips, it could be things that are out of their control, perhaps, right? Their doctor's appointment went long. They had a medical emergency. We have riders with cognitive disabilities, and so that can be very challenging for them. So a missed trip in and of itself is not the end of the world, of course. We work with data, and we need data to tell us that there is a pattern of valid missed trips. Okay, I just decided earlier today I'm going to develop a no-show training. We're going to go through the no-show guidance in the ADA, and we're going to talk about how to put a really good policy together and then how to enforce it, which is not easy. It's a very high standard, right? Those of you know that have worked with me and many of my messaging, it's a very high standard, intentionally designed by the ADA and the FTA to deny services to people with disabilities. And so it's not simply a no-show, it is a valid no-show. And there are no-shows that are invalid and that we cannot use to hold a rider accountable, okay? So very, very important. What else is interesting here? If contact is made with the rider when the outbound trip is no-showed, for example, the dispatcher may reach out to the rider when a call is made to alert them that the vehicle has arrived. The dispatcher should ask the rider if they would still like the return trip, right? So let's just say we have a call out for the initial pickup, confirming your trip or your vehicle has arrived, and the rider says, "Oh, I don't need that trip after all." Obviously, that's a no-show, right? Or that's a missed trip, which is the same for data purposes as a no-show. It is perfectly allowable for dispatch or whoever staff was calling to say, "I understand. I'll note, that this trip is not needed. Do you also need the return trip, or do you also need the trip scheduled at 10 a.m.? Maybe this one was an 8 a.m. pickup." And if they respond to us, "No, I won't need that one either," right? That one is going to depend on what your cancellation policy is. I'm most comfortable, and what I see most often are that riders can cancel 1 to 2 hours before the pickup. It depends what your policy says. I'm not a fan, and I'm not quite sure how reasonable it is if you require riders in your paratransit program to cancel a trip the day before. That seems to be a little unreasonable, a little unfair. And a lot of us, especially people with disabilities, we wake up, we take our medication, we don't feel very well. Maybe I don't feel good enough to travel. We don't always have that information. Maybe most of the time we don't have that information about how we are going to feel the day before. Okay. So I hope that information was helpful for you. Let me pull up, I don't know any other way but to put this on the screen so we can see these questions together. Okay, I hope that's all right. Here we have a question. Can we permanently deny service to a rider? The answer is under certain circumstances, yes. We have a rider who is refusing to keep the walker buckled, was very rude, cursing at the driver, and then started in with another rider once she boarded. I was told per the ADA we cannot permanently deny, but we can suspend. Um, there is nothing under the ADA that I'm aware of that addresses permanently suspending people. But we do have, I believe, in our general code of conduct guidance, or it's very common in policies where if someone is violent or illegal conduct that we can attempt. How we control this in paratransit we can, but in a fixed route bus and rail it's probably impossible. But permanently removing people from service. So I'm going to say uh, if we were to move to permanently suspend or eliminate services from someone ever using our program, we would have to have a pattern of that data, right? It couldn't necessarily, for what you describe here, probably not necessarily be because of a single incident. Now, if you have a rider that hit and injured anyone, whether this rider is disabled or not, I believe just from our history in our industry, I believe we have enough to permanently remove someone from services, okay? But for disconnecting the walker, obviously you're securing the walker in the securement area. The person is taking a seat. I hope that's your policy. That would be the safest policy. We did talk in our last session about we are allowed to have a policy of preventing people from sitting in their walker when the walker is on the vehicle and especially secured in the wheelchair securement area. So if we are documenting these things, Mariah, we have a pattern of it, then I would say we can move towards perhaps permanently denying service. And we have a whole lot of examples, rude and cursing. Yes, we have code of conduct that says that people have to act appropriately, right? But there's also language in the ADA that says sometimes a person disability causes certain conduct. Like if a person has Tourette's, they might be yelling out bad words. So we have to be really careful with that. Is the cursing a reflection of their disability? Right? And then arguing with another rider, obviously that's problematic. That's probably the least severe issue of what you've detailed here. And I would say arguing with another rider is not ideal. I don't know that it necessarily rises to the level of, unsafe. So now if they get into a fight and they start fighting, and if this rider in question is the one that started it and was the aggressor, I think we have a lot there. But documenting every incident, sending them letters, describing your policy, and our policy was a reflection of the ADA. And on this date, you did not comply with policy and it's a violation. And on this date, you didn't. And you have been warned multiple times. And if it happens again, services will be permanently denied, etc., etc. The other thing I would say, Mariah, before I leave this topic is make sure your attorney, whoever your legal support is on board with going in that direction to try to permanently deny services to someone. Because in my experience, staff, we do everything, we build the case, we take it to legal, and then legal rejects it because they don't want to have to potentially deal with a lawsuit. So that's a separate issue, but a very, very important one. I have had that experience in my career and it can feel really frustrated. So I hope that was helpful. A little long answer, but a lot of pieces, a lot of moving pieces here. Your documentation, pull the audio, pull the video, create your file, save all of it. All right. And then work to move forward if you have all of the information and proof that you need. Okay. Here's a question. I am researching assessments to use to assist with determining paratransit eligibility for mental health conditions and disabilities. Oh boy. What assessments do you recommend for this? Well, I think the best one in our industry is FACS testing, FACTS, right? You can type that in all caps, FACS paratransit, and you'll get tons of information. I even have some documentation. I go through this testing as a tool during my ADA paratransit eligibility training. And so you can go to my website and you can see when that next webinar is coming up and register for that. And I talk about it. But yes, there's a lot of cognitive related evaluation elements as a part of the FACS testing or the facts approach for assessment. So I think primarily it was designed for people that initially were believed to be maybe Down syndrome, etc. But I think there's a lot of pieces in there that can be really, really helpful for you. The other thing I'll share with you on that topic of cognitive disabilities and paratransit assessment is really in consistency of the information that you have collected, okay? My philosophy with paratransit eligibility is that we need to become experts at collecting it and documenting it, and then using that to make a reasonable determination, okay? So is the way that the writer has completed your application, for example, consistent with how the doctor has completed their professional verification if you use that? The other thing I would add, if you don't do this, most agencies have a paper process for eligibility. I would say we want to add a telephone interview. All right. If someone describes to you that they have cognitive disabilities, etc., and you only have a paper process, maybe we want to expand that process to include a telephone interview so you can communicate with them and you can ask questions and you can see if their responses are consistent with their application responses. I think that that is really a recipe for helping us collect as much information as possible. But once we have all of these pieces of information, comparing and contrasting them together. So I hope that's helpful to you, Maria, and thank you so much. I haven't been out to Wichita. I'd love to come out and do some trainings. So any of you interested in having me out to do training on site with your drivers, your road supervisors, dispatchers, we can do wheelchair securement training on vehicles as well. So count me in if you need that. All right. Let's see, there's a feedback here. You could also arrange a real bus trip with an assessor and instructions they may follow. Yes, now we're getting into in-person assessments. And of course, that is a great way of attempting to understand a person's abilities and therefore disabilities in using public transit. Of course, that's a significant additional cost, usually in staff time for that approach, and maybe for many it's cost prohibitive, but maybe for a handful of your applicants that fall into certain categories, maybe that would be a great element to add. So thank you for sharing that so much, Kim. Much appreciated. Here's a question regarding natural disasters, and given the limits on available transportation resources during emergencies, can an agency cancel non-life sustaining appointments to help reduce the use of transit assets, or is this a violation of the ADA? Assets may be used to evacuate the affected community. I think our experience during COVID, and thank you, Tiffany, my good friend from Hilo, Hawaii, aloha. Wonderful to get that question. And I think we learned a lot during COVID. And so what I'm going to do is revert back to what COVID taught us. And that was sort of kicking the can, if you will, to your local authorities. And the guidance from FTA was, if your local authorities set a standard that says travel should only be made for life-sustaining services, I think we can use that. Maybe that's our local health department or local government agencies. If they create these standards that say that, then I think we can absolutely follow those, and it would not be a violation of the ADA. But without any local guidance with regards to trip purpose, I think we might be stepping into violations of the ADA. If there is no local guidance, which means everyone can travel for any reason during this emergency, quote unquote, emergency, then I think we do need to comply with the ADA and continue to transport people. So, I mean, obviously during an emergency like a hurricane or fires, like we've had here in Southern California the last few years, like if there are local government orders that says no one is to travel, no one is to leave their home, etc., etc., then I would say that's what we have, and we can shut down public transit services as well, right? And we should have excellent processes for communicating when we do need to shut services down or when our services are going to be impacted. Obviously, our website, social media, if we have text lists, email lists, through disability organizations. All of these ways should be a part of the ways that we communicate to our ridership communities and populations. But yes, so I hope that guidance, Tiffany, is very helpful to you and to others. Here's another question. Is a transit agency able to start and end services at the bottom of an accessible ramp at a rider's home due to the lack of handrail or border on the outer edge of a ramp? Or is a driver required to push the individual in a wheelchair up or down the ramp? And does this require a request for a reasonable modification? You are really challenging me today, Tiffany. All right, let's break this into pieces. A ramp is not considered to be fully accessible unless it does have the handrails on it, okay? And there are also, it's much more complicated than that. Depending on the lift of the ramp, I don't have these specifications because that is more of a facility accessibility element. I don't have that right in front of me, but we also have to, after a certain distance, have a platform, a level platform that is large enough. I want to say it's 48 inches by 48 inches, so a person in a wheelchair could turn around. That's where you will see ramps that go up. There's a platform, and then it will go back up again, right? So I would say that yes, if we have a ramp that is not fully compliant, that would be slope, that would be areas of the platform to turn and change directions, and that would also be hand railings, right? And there are probably others, anti-slip requirements and things like that. So the answer would be yes. Now, how do we handle that? We need to go evaluate it, probably take pictures, get the dimensions and everything, and have someone compare that to the ADA requirements, okay? You might even want to consider, this is what we have in California. They're called CASP, California Accessibility Specialists. So I don't know if you have something similar in your states, but these are people that have been specifically certified on accessibility features of facilities like a ramp. Okay. And so you can hire one of these people. Now we have a third party evaluation, and they will evaluate and they will give you their report. And if their evaluation is that this location, this ramp is not accessible, then we can use that and we can move forward. So as far as a reasonable modification of policy, okay, if we are talking about paratransit, we are required, if it is safe to do so, to provide assistance to and from the door, okay? So we can ask during reservations in advance, do you need assistance to and from the door? And if they say yes, then we are supposed to provide that. If they haven't requested door-to-door service, and let's say they requested curb to curb, but now they want door-to-door, and it's very reasonable that they could change their mind. They could be feeling bad. Maybe when they made the reservation, they were having a good day. Now they're having a bad day. Maybe weather, it's raining and they're worried about slipping. Maybe it's dark and they don't have great vision. So there are lots of reasons why people need door-to-door service, right? And they are the ones that determine whether they need door-to-door service. So sure, we can consider that a request for a modification. And then perhaps the only reason we would deny that request would be for safety reasons, okay? Because we do have in the ADA guidance under paratransit services the requirement for origin to destination, also called door-to-door, also called by some beyond the curb. So I hope that answers your question. Is there anyone who would like to unmute themselves and perhaps ask a question? Anything ADA related that has come up for you? You're welcome, Tiffany. Thanks for being on here today. Seems pretty easy. I wonder if towards the end of the day we're just tired and we can't think of any good situations. What's another situation that came up recently? Well, I always get questions about the direction that people are allowed to board on a vehicle. The ADA guidance and the guidance from the FTA and the circular is that people with disabilities should ultimately get to decide what direction they board your vehicle in. Okay? That is the guidance from the FTA. However, many of us that have talked about this we do feel like if someone needs assistance with boarding, meaning we are providing the assistance, the driver, then we can have a preference to the direction that they board. So, for example, uh, yesterday I was doing a training here in Southern California with an agency, and we used a side loading low floor van, okay, that had a manual pull out ramp. It would be very unsafe to back someone up the ramp into that van because the person could just lean forward and fall right out onto the concrete. And obviously that would be very, very problematic. Okay. So what do we want to do? We want to push them towards the van onto the vehicle, and then we would need to turn them because always with the equipment that we have, unless you have a rear facing securement system, and most agencies do not, your securement equipment is forward facing. So we must always transport people forward facing. The seatbelts won't work, quite frankly, if the person is not forward facing. So that's very important. That would be different, for example, maybe if we have a lift equipped vehicle, okay? I was the day before we were using a rear loading lift equipped vehicle. We still pushed them in forward towards the van, but a side loading lift equipped vehicle, that person we would want to be facing away from the vehicle. So we would push them onto the lift, facing away from the vehicle, right? Once they're up at vehicle level, we would go inside and we would then back them in and we would place them in the securement area. So a lot of our processes, how we board, how we assist in boarding customers with disabilities, especially using wheelchairs, etc. How we do that, quite frankly, is often vehicle specific, okay? Also on the topic of like assisting riders using wheelchairs, I get questions a lot about people using scooters, three-wheel scooters. And we do know that three-wheel scooters, well, just in general, uh, the guidance is that people using wheelchairs or scooters have the right to board separately from their device. So someone could say, I'm going to go ahead and board. You can assist me with my wheelchair or with my scooter. And we're supposed to do that. That's why in all of my trainings, I teach you how to put power wheelchairs and scooters into free wheel mode. Someone could get up out of their wheelchair and walk on board and take a seat, and then you are responsible for boarding their wheelchair, right? So that's why we want to know how to, with their approval, put a wheelchair into freewheel mode and a scooter. Thank you, Tiffany, so much for joining us today. Yeah, that's a big one, right? So, and let's just say we help someone in their wheelchair to get on our vehicle, and now they're in the securement area. They could, if they want to, leave their wheelchair or leave their scooter and transfer to a seat. Perfectly allowable. Then we would connect their seatbelts. If it's on a bus, obviously there are no seatbelts, so they would take a seat and we would secure the wheelchair. And it's as simple as that. So especially with scooters, I like a policy where we say would you consider transferring to a seat? It is a safer ride for you. And that's how we take care of that, okay? So I don't see any other questions that are typed in here. Little information about my upcoming webinars. October 2nd, Paratransit Eligibility. Another new training, enhancing your oversight program. Who is watching your operations? Is it road supervisors? Because what I see with most agencies is that road supervisors, for the most part, only respond when there's an issue. But we need to have a process, practices for the oversight of our drivers, right? So we have a new training, enhancing driver ADA oversight. And this is going to be excellent. I mentioned to you improving the driver ADA training program. We'll talk about tools. We'll talk about of creating a philosophy. We'll talk about how do we prepare our drivers in training to be successful. So we might need to do a little bit of work with them before we actually get into the training portion of our program, right? We want them to be successful, don't we? What I'm seeing around the country is that you're lucky if 50% of your driver trainees make it through the program and make it through the first month of being a driver in any of your services. That's not good enough anymore, right? We need to make sure if they come into the training program that they can be as successful as possible. And then managing the ADA complaints investigation process. This is a very, very important part of your ADA program. By the way, do you refer to your ADA efforts as an ADA program? Do you have an ADA meeting where you talk about all of these efforts? 99% of agencies don't. It's handled during your safety efforts, and I think that that is a bit of a challenge, right? ADA should be its own program, and we can talk more about that in the future. And a part of that, of course, is managing ADA complaints. Most ADA complaints, not most, two-thirds of ADA complaints have multiple elements. The driver was rude. They didn't want to assist me. They only partially secured the wheelchair. That's three ADA elements. Does your complaints process allow you to capture all three and investigate all three? That will improve your data significantly. So this is an amazing training. I think we'll all learn a whole lot in that training, and that one is coming up on September 17th. So another question. Can we get in trouble with the ADA if we are unable to meet demand? The answer is, if we're talking about ADA paratransit, absolutely. If you are a non-ADA required demand responsive service, like a local dollar ride, and you don't have fixed route bus, and you just provide services, to provide a service to your community, then the answer is you are only going to get in trouble if you do not meet demand, if your data shows that you are unreasonably denying services to people with disabilities. Okay? If you are denying services to a variety of ridership groups and the data looks like it's equitable, you're denying people in wheelchairs and you're denying people that are not disabled and etc., then you're going to be okay. But if your data honestly shows that you are unfairly denying services to any particular ridership group, especially riders with disabilities, then I'm going to say yes, you can get in trouble with that, right? That's been one of my biggest heartburns, if you will, with agencies using like TNCs, the Uber Lyft concept for providing public transportation, because we need equity of service. And if it takes 2 or 3 minutes for an Uber or Lyft to show up to pick up someone, and it takes 45 minutes for a person to be picked up using a wheelchair, we do not have equity, and we absolutely have compliance and discrimination issues going on there. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, you finished off by saying an example is a senior with a disability who uses our service to get their work, and their trip was denied because there wasn't capacity. So denials in and of themselves are not a problem. They are in paratransit, but for any other service, it really does come down to, are these denials equitable? Was everyone that called in during that hour denied because there was no capacity? The data would show that. So, yeah. So, I don't have anything else to offer you right now, Maria, regarding mental health issues. So I understand. Now we're really talking about maybe emotional type issues or I'm not really sure, frankly, that there's a difference between cognitive disabilities. I'm feeling like they all sort of fall into the same category. Uh, that's quite a challenge. Yeah, bipolar, I understand. It's all about how do these disabilities affect the person's ability to use transit. Now, if anyone is having, manic episodes where they're acting violent and I mean, we can absolutely do something about that, right? Uh, so I kind of feel like, frankly, they kind of fall into the same category. Really, we're talking about safety, and someone with bipolar can definitely create some unsafe situations on board, and we can deny services to them if they do create a seriously disruptive environment. Last question I'll answer. Some clarification. You were talking about no-shows and return trip cancellations for paratransit. Yes. Uh, I'm going to say that we have a very high standard for no-shows in paratransit. So I was talking about paratransit, but yes, you can have a no-show policy similar to your paratransit policy for your other services as well. For your non-ADA required demand responsive service, maybe it's a mobility on demand. You eliminated fixed route, therefore you eliminated paratransit. You replaced it with a mobility on demand or microtransit service. Yes, you can have a no-show policy with that. I guess technically you could create any type of no-show policy that you want, but we want to be really careful because we need to be reasonable. We cannot be unfair. So maybe the paratransit guidance can be helpful to you, but I think this would be something, obviously, if you have a service, any service right now, and you do not have a no-show policy and you want to implement one, 100% absolutely, that should be done with a full public participation process. It should never be done independent of the disability community or of the rest of your community, and you just decide, oh, here's a good policy. I found one on another transit agency's website. We're going to do this. And then you implement it, and now it goes into service, and you never gave the public the opportunity to provide feedback. That would be a problem. The ADA does require public participation. All right. So thank you all so much for your time and attention today. I hope to see some of you in my upcoming webinars. I hope to see more of you registering for the training in Hawaii. We have about 5 spots left. And so, yes, please, any other way that I can assist all of you, please consider me a resource, okay? And you all know that I do also help agencies with policies. So we could do a project where I review your ADA related policies and provide some updates and feedback. We can do that with your driver training program. We can do this with your oversight program, right? We can do this with eligibility. I just did last month, maybe the month before, a review of an eligibility determination program, 2 of them actually, including review of the application, looking at your data, your denial rates, all of these other things. So lots of ways that ADA Guru can be an assistance for all of you. So thank you all so much. Appreciate your time and attention as always in supporting my work, and keep up the great work because it's so very important. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.